Before we get started, let's ask ourselves the question, what is truly universal? What does universal mean? So when we have a look at the devices that are out there, then you can see that there are many different screen sizes. We have the iPad Air, the iPad Mini, we have the new iPhones, which come in two different screen sizes, the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus, and we have the iPod Touch 5th generation, the iPhone 5 and the iPhone 5S, which all share one screen size. And there is also one device out there which still supports iOS 8, so we also need to think about this device when we create our user interface and when we think about artwork and stuff like that. So this is the iPhone 4S and it's still supported by iOS 8, so we have to think about that when we create our apps. And when we think about the different screen sizes, we also need to think about the artwork that we use within our apps and the assets that we use. So assets like app icons, launch images, button images, background images. And this table, you can see the different requirements for all of the different devices. You can see that that we have the iPhone 6 Plus, which requires 3 times as many pixels as a non-retina display. So when we compare the first column and the last column, you can see there is the iPad 2 and the iPad Mini with a non-retina display. They just require one times the pixels, so the original size actually, and the newer models of the iPad with retina displays and the iPad Mini and the iPhone 4S, they all need 2 times as many pixels as the actual image. Image size here. So you have to think about that when you create the icons for your application and when you create the artwork for your application. So basically you need to start with 3 times as many pixels as the actual screen size, because you have to think about the iPhone 6 Plus. And then you have to create a 3x version, a 2x version, and a 1x version of your artwork. And all this stuff is very, very easy to handle when we have a look at Xcode later, and we can provide all of these images and include them within the Xcode assets, and the code that we are going to write automatically takes advantage of this assets folder and inserts the correct images for the correct screen size. But you have to think about all these resolutions when you create your artwork. So this is really important. So we have to think about artwork, we have to think about the resolution of our images that we use, and we have to think, of course, about the user interface, which differs from one screen size to another. And because the iPhone 4S is still out there, we also need to think about how the content of the application looks on a very little screen compared to the iPhone 6 Plus or an iPad. So let me give you an example of an application that changes a lot from screen size when we look at different screen sizes. Let's start with the iPod 5th generation. So what we see here looks exactly the same as on the iPhone 5 and the iPhone 5S. So this is the CNN app. And what you can see is that the user interface is different when you use it in landscape or when you use it in portrait. The landscape mode supports a table view on the left side and less information on the right side. Therefore, you get more news displayed in the table view than you can see in the portrait view. So when we look at this version of the app, this is the iPod of iPhone 5 or iPhone 5S version, and compare it to the iPhone 6 Plus version of it, there you can see that the table view on the left side gives you more information by inserting the images of the news. So we can think about the way we enhance the user experience with the enhanced screen size and only give the user what he really needs to see and what's comfortable on a specific screen size. So this is the iPhone 6 Plus version of it. So when we compare it now to the iPad, which has a much larger screen as the iPhone, as all iPhones, then you can see that the layout completely changes and gives you much more of a grid view of all the current news. So this is the iOS world, but some applications also benefit from thinking about the Mac. So actually, you also have to think about, when you create truly universal applications, if it makes sense to create an application that also supports the Mac. And one example of that is Clear, which looks very, very much alike on all of the different platforms, like the iPhone, the iPad, and the Mac, but also has the specific requirements for the different environments. So this is a great example. But when you work with data and user data, like to-dos, when we're talking about Clear, then you also need to think about the way you communicate between those different platforms. So we have to think about the cloud. And the cloud enables us to transfer the user data into it and sync it with all the different devices that the user owns. So like the Apple Photos application, which you can use on your iPad, you can use it on your MacBook or your iMac or whatever, and you can use it on your iPhone, and you always get the same data. So we need to think about a cloud service. Of course, we could use iCloud to do that, or when we even think on a broader scale and we want an application that also supports other platforms like Android or Windows Phone, then we need to think about another solution, because iCloud is not supported on Android, neither Android nor Windows Phone. So a good alternative is Parse, which allows us to transfer data from all platforms to all platforms. So this was a quick overview about what you have to think about when you talk about truly universal apps. So let's get right into it and start with the basics of creating truly universal apps.